My own daughter told me I was dead to her while I was still standing in front of her. Then, the words sliced through me sharper than any knife could. I stood frozen, suitcase in hand, passport tucked neatly inside, ready for the long, awaited trip I had planned for Anna and me. I had dreamed of this journey across Europe for months, thinking it would be our chance to laugh again, to heal the cracks that had quietly grown between us. But instead of gratitude, instead of love, I was met with cruelty. Her husband, Patrick, stood beside her, smirking like he had won some private battle. It was his voice that carried the final blow. "You're not coming, Edward. We don't need dead weight on this trip." Anna didn't defend me. She didn't even look ashamed. She just stood there, silent, as if she agreed. Dead weight. That's what I had become in their eyes. Not the father who raised her alone after her mother's illness stole my partner away. Not the man who worked overtime for years to pay her tuition. Who skipped meals so she could eat. Who sold his truck to cover her first down payment on a home. No, just a burden. I set my suitcase down slowly, the sound of it hitting the floor echoing through the hallway like a gavel striking. My chest ached. My hands trembled. And yet the silence between us was louder than any argument could ever be. I searched her face for even a flicker of the little girl who once clung to my hand at the county fair. Who cried when I left for work. Who whispered, "I love you, Dad," before bed. She was gone. And as they turned away, leaving me stranded in my own house with my own broken heart, one thought burned so fiercely it left me shaking. How could my own blood cast me aside as if I never mattered? Before that day, if you had asked me about my life, I would have told you it was simple, maybe even ordinary, but filled with meaning. My world revolved around my daughter, Anna, from the moment her mother, Margaret, passed away. I became both parents at once. I was the one who braided her hair before school, who packed her lunch, who clapped louder than anyone else at her spelling bees. Every decision I made for decades centered around her happiness. I gave up promotions that required travel, sold the cabin I had inherited from my father, and turned down every chance at companionship just to keep my time free for her. I worked 30 years at the manufacturing plant in Springfield, Illinois. The work was hard and the hours long, but I never complained. Each paycheck meant Anna had piano lessons, new shoes for school, a warm winter coat. I still remember the way her eyes lit up when I surprised her with her first bicycle. She rode up and down the street until the sun sank low, laughing with the pure joy only a child can know. I sat on the porch that evening, hands aching from overtime shifts, but my heart was full. That was the kind of man I was, willing to break myself so she would never feel broken. When she went to college, I felt both proud and terrified. Proud because she had earned scholarships and letters of recommendation that proved her hard work. Terrified because I wondered if she would forget the man who stayed up late helping her write essays, who sold his old pickup truck to cover the tuition gap her scholarships didn't reach. I promised myself I would never let money be the reason she had to give up a dream. So I drained part of my retirement account, thinking, I'll rebuild it later. She needs this now. Oh, those years flew by, and though I spent them in solitude, I didn't mind. Holidays were still ours. Thanksgiving dinners where Anna and I cooked together, her peeling potatoes while I roasted the turkey. Christmas mornings with stockings stuffed to the brim. Even when I had to charge gifts on a credit card, she would smile and hug me, whispering, "Dad." And for me, that was enough. Then came Patrick. At first, I wanted to believe he was good for her. He was polite in the beginning, shaking my hand firmly, calling me sir. I paid for their wedding every flower, every plate of food, every rented chair in the church. $40,000 gone in one night. But I told myself it was worth it. She was radiant in her gown, walking down the aisle with her arm linked through mine, my eyes blurred with tears of pride, not knowing they were also tears for the future I was about to lose. After the wedding, things began to shift. At Sunday dinners, Patrick would dominate conversations, speaking over me, dismissing my stories with a smirk. When I tried to share memories from Anna's childhood, he would interrupt with tales of his own family, making sure I felt like a guest in my daughter's life rather than her father. Anna laughed at his jokes, sometimes at my expense. I told myself it was harmless, that marriage was about building new dynamics, and I should adjust. Still, I never stopped giving. When their car broke down, I paid for a new one. When the bank refused their mortgage, I signed without hesitation, even covering the down payment myself. It cost me $80,000 from my retirement savings. I told myself it was an investment in their future, in Anna's security. I watched them move into their 3-bedroom home on Willow Creek Drive, their smiles wide as they held the keys. Anna hugged me tightly that day and whispered, "I couldn't do this without you." That single sentence erased every doubt, every sleepless night, every ache in my back from years of work. For birthdays, I was the one who showed up with the biggest gifts, the one who made sure their bills were paid when layoffs hit Patrick's company. I canceled vacations with old friends so I could babysit when they needed time away. I turned down invitations from women in my church choir, women who asked me to dinner, because Anna needed me to help her move furniture or paint a nursery for children who never came. My life was hers, all of it, because I believed that's what love looked like. Looking back now, I see the subtle cracks. I see how Patrick's eyes hardened whenever Anna thanked me. I see how she stopped calling me dad in front of him, replacing it with Edward, as if being my daughter was suddenly something to be embarrassed about. I see how my place at their table slowly moved further from the center, how my voice grew quieter in conversations that were no longer meant to include me. But at the time, I refused to notice. I told myself every family goes through changes. I told myself she loved me, even if it wasn't the same. I told myself my sacrifices mattered, and I carried that hope like a fragile glass, protecting it with both hands, not knowing how soon it would be shattered into 1,000 pieces. The first time I truly felt the knife slide between us, it was so subtle that at first, I told myself it didn't matter. It was a Saturday afternoon in late spring, the kind of day meant for family barbecues and laughter. The sun was high. Children were playing in yards, and I had spent the morning marinating ribs the way Anna loved since she was little. She used to beg me to make them every summer, standing beside me on the porch as I brushed sauce over the grill, her hair tied back in a ponytail, her eyes bright with excitement. Now, she arrived late with Patrick, both of them dressed in expensive casual clothes, sunglasses perched on their heads. I waved from the porch, apron already smeared with sauce, eager to see her face light up the way it used to. Instead, she barely looked at me before heading straight to the backyard, greeting neighbors she hadn't seen in months. "Anna," I called, smiling, holding up a plate. "I made your favorite. Extra smoky, just the way you liked." Anna waited out. She hesitated, her hand on Patrick's arm, then shook her head. "Thanks, Dad. But we already ate on the way. Patrick doesn't like heavy food before dinner." "Any well to?" I laughed softly, though it wasn't funny. "It's ribs, sweetheart. Just one bite." "Any well to?" Patrick's voice cut in, cool and dismissive. "She said she's fine. Edward. No need to push." "Any well to?" "Edward." The name stung worse than the rejection of the food. My daughter hadn't called me that since she was 16 and angry over curfews. Hearing it now, on my own porch, with my own plate in my hand, felt like being shoved out of my own home. I swallowed hard and set the plate down, forcing a smile. Of course, maybe later. And attend the one of this season. The rest of the afternoon played out like a scene where I no longer belonged. Conversations flowed around me, but I wasn't part of them. Patrick told stories about his parents' lake house, about their family vacations, about his father's golf club membership. Anna laughed along, nodding, glowing with pride, as if she were auditioning to stay in his family, instead of standing with me, the man who had carried her through every storm. I tried to join in once. I mentioned the time I took Anna fishing when she was 10. How she screamed when she caught her first perch. How she insisted we fry it up even though it was barely the size of her hand. It had been one of my favorite memories. A day we had laughed until our stomachs ached. But before I could finish, Patrick interrupted. That's cute. But Anna's not really into that kind of thing anymore. She's grown up. Edward. And never. Anna smiled. A weak, guilty smile. And said nothing. I sat back in my chair, ribs growing cold on the table, the taste of ash filling my mouth, though I hadn't taken a single bite. I told myself it was fine, that families evolve, that children grow. But the truth settled like a stone in my chest. Something had shifted. My little girl, once inseparable from me, now stood on the other side of an invisible wall I couldn't cross. Later that night, after everyone had left, I cleaned up the backyard alone, empty cups scattered across the grass. Half-eaten food, tossed carelessly aside. I wrapped up the untouched ribs and slid them into the fridge. Though I knew no one would eat them, the silence pressed heavy against my ears, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the faint echo of my neighbor's laughter drifting through open windows. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the greasy apron crumpled in my lap. My hands still smelled of smoke and sauce, scents that once meant joy but now stung like a reminder of rejection. I thought about how quickly she had dismissed me, how easily Patrick had spoken over me, how naturally she had let it happen. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. She's grown up. Edward. The words twisted inside me, cruel in their casualness. Was I nothing more than a relic of her past? Something she had outgrown? I tried to convince myself it was just one moment, one slip, but deep down, I knew better. The first cut had been made. It was small, almost invisible, but it bled all the same. And though I didn't realize it then, that cut would never heal. It would only grow deeper, slicing through years of love and sacrifice, until all that remained between us was the hollow space where family used to be. If the barbecue had been the first cut, then the wedding anniversary trip was the wound that nearly gutted me. It was late autumn when Anna called, her voice bright, almost rehearsed. Dad, Patrick and I are planning something special for his parents. Their 30th anniversary. We're taking them to Napa for a week. You know, wine tours, hot air balloons, the works. Farn days. I felt my chest swell with pride. That sounds wonderful. I'll cover part of it. You know I'd love to help. There was a pause on the line, long enough for the silence to thicken. No, Dad, we don't need that. Patrick and I have it handled. Her words should have comforted me, but her tone carried something else. Something cold? I asked, carefully. And will I be joining you? The laugh that followed was soft but sharp enough to slice me open. Oh, Dad, It's just for Patrick's parents. They deserve this. It's their family trip. Family trip. Two words that dropped like stones in my stomach. I had been there for every moment of her life. Birthdays, graduations, heartbreaks, victories, and now, in her mind, family meant the people who had only entered her life a decade ago. I tried to keep my voice steady. Anna, I would have loved to celebrate with you. You know, your mother and I never got the chance for anniversaries like that. It would have meant a lot. Ree said. Her sigh was impatient, like I had embarrassed her. Dad, don't make this about you. Please. Patrick thinks it's important to show his parents how much we appreciate them. They've been so supportive. We have supportive. The word echoed bitterly in my mind. Had they paid her tuition? Had they sat through nights in hospital waiting rooms when she had pneumonia at 12? Had they sold their car so she could have a safe place to live during college? No. That had been me. Always me. But I said nothing. My throat closed around the words, leaving only silence. When the trip finally came, I told myself it was fine. I would stay home. Keep busy. I bought a few books. Planned to work in the yard. But then I saw the photos. Anna posted them on social media. Her and Patrick holding wine glasses. Patrick's parents in wide hats and summer scarves. All of them beaming under the California sun. The caption read, "So blessed to celebrate true family." For Maine, true family. I stared at the screen until my eyes blurred. My hands trembled as I set the phone down. The images burning behind my eyelids. For the first time, I felt something inside me break, not just bend, not just bruise, but crack. I went to my study and opened the old photo albums stacked neatly on the shelf. There she was. A 5-year-old in overalls, covered in flour as we baked cookies together. A teenager with braces, grinning as she held up her driver's license. A young woman in a cap and gown, my arm around her shoulders. Both of us shining with pride. Every page screamed proof that I had been her true family all along. Yet here I was, shut out, erased, replaced. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced from room to room. The house too quiet, too empty. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, but it only burned on the way down, doing nothing to dull the ache. My mind replayed her words again and again. Don't make this about you. As if my desire to be included was selfish. As if wanting to share in her happiness was a burden. At dawn, I sat by the window, watching the neighborhood come to life. Cars starting, dogs barking, children waiting for buses, families moving together. I felt like a ghost, watching a world I no longer belonged to. The deeper wound wasn't just that I had been excluded. It was realizing that my daughter no longer saw me as part of her future. She had built a new circle, and I was outside of it, left to press my face against the glass like a stranger. I whispered into the quiet. My voice hoarse. When did I stop being enough for you? Anna? The walls gave no answer. Only the echo of my own grief filled the room. I thought I had felt the sharpest pain already. But the day I discovered the truth, the ground shifted under me in a way I will never forget. It started with a phone notification. Something so ordinary, so harmless, that I almost ignored it. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my morning coffee, the newspaper spread out, when my phone buzzed with an alert from the bank. Transaction approved. At first I assumed it was my utility bill. Or maybe the pharmacy refilling my prescription. But when I glanced down at the screen, my hand froze. A charge from Venice, Italy. I frowned, blinking as if I had misread it. €85 at a restaurant. I stared harder, my breath catching. Venice. My daughter and her husband had flown there for their anniversary trip without me. Of course, but the charge wasn't theirs. It was mine. My credit card. My chest tightened. I logged into my account, fingers trembling, and pulled up the statement, one after another. The transactions appeared, lined up like insults. Hotel Rialto, gondola tours, luxury boutiques. Every single one charged to the emergency card I had given Anna years ago when she was struggling to build credit. I had told her, "This is only for emergencies, sweetheart. Just until you're on your feet." Here, apparently, in her eyes, sipping champagne by the Grand Canal counted as an emergency. I set the phone down on the table, my vision swimming. The betrayal wasn't just emotional anymore, it was financial. Deliberate. Calculated. They hadn't only excluded me from their lives, they had been draining me to fund the life they wanted without me. I walked to my study, pulled open the bottom drawer, and retrieved the folder I kept out of habit. Receipts. Statements. Loan documents. Proof of every sacrifice I had made. There it was, the check for her college tuition. The withdrawal slip from my retirement savings for their mortgage. The invoice for the car I had purchased when Patrick lost his job. Page after page of my life poured into theirs, and now, the digital evidence on my phone that they were still bleeding me dry. I sat at the desk, my hands shaking so hard the papers slipped from my grip, scattering across the floor. My heart pounded in my ears. I whispered to myself, "Oh, I was never family. Oh, I was a wallet." The words felt like acid on my tongue, but they were true. The phone buzzed again. Another alert. This time, a charge at a jewelry store in Florence. $2,000. I could almost see them. Anna smiling as Patrick slid a bracelet over her wrist. Both of them laughing as if it were their own money. I pressed the phone against my chest, willing myself to breathe. Memories collided in my head. Her tiny hand in mine on her first day of kindergarten. Her tear-streaked face when I told her mother had passed. Her proud smile at graduation. Every sacrifice I had made. Every joy I had felt. All of it crumbling beneath the weight of this betrayal. I dialed her number. My hands unsteady. It rang 3 times before she answered. Her voice cheerful. Wind and chatter in the background. "Hi. Dad." "Anna," I said. My throat raw. "Why are there charges from Venice on my card?" There was silence. Then a nervous laugh. "Oh, it was just easier. Dad. We didn't want to deal with exchange rates and international fees. We'll pay you back." Quote, "Pay me back?" My voice cracked. "You told me this was family only. You shut me out, and now you're using my money to live the vacation I planned for all of us?" Her voice cooled instantly, sharp as glass. "Dad, don't be dramatic. It's just money. You've always helped me. Why should this be any different?" I opened my mouth, but no words came. Just the crushing weight of understanding. She didn't see it as stealing. She saw it as her right. When the call ended, I slumped back in my chair, surrounded by fallen papers and decades of proof that love, in her eyes, had always been measured in dollars. The study felt like a courtroom. The documents around me evidence of my own foolishness. And in that heavy silence, I finally admitted the truth I had been avoiding for years. My daughter loved the life I gave her, not the man who gave it. I could have stayed silent, let the anger fester like rot beneath the surface, but silence had been my prison for too long. That night, after seeing yet another charge appear on my card, Star Hotel in Florence, I called Anna again. I didn't care what time it was there. Didn't care if Patrick was listening. I needed to hear her voice. Needed her to face me. She answered on the third ring. Dad, it's late here. Can't this wait? No. Anna, I said, my voice trembling not with weakness, but with rage. It cannot wait. Tell me why you keep using my card after you told me I wasn't family enough to be with you. Here's not him. I could hear background laughter, the clink of wine glasses, and then Patrick's voice, mocking. What now? Edward? More whining about being left behind? My breath caught. You're the one who told her I'd ruin everything. You're the one who decided I didn't belong. Here's not him. Patrick chuckled. Low and cruel. We just wanted peace. Old man, you hover. You cling. You make everything about you. It was supposed to be a vacation, not babysitting. And for Logan helpnades, babysitting. Years of hurt exploding all at once. I raised her alone. I gave her everything I had. Every breath, every dollar, every ounce of strength was for her. And you call that babysitting? Anna's tone sharpened, colder than I had ever heard. Dad. Stop it. Patrick's right. You make things heavy. You guilt me every time I accept your help. It's exhausting. And for Logan in the process. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear. My chest burning. Guilt? You think I bought your first car to make you feel guilty? That I sold my retirement to give you a home so you would owe me? I did it because I loved you. Because that's what a father does. Olno Finken. Patrick's laughter spilled through the line again. And look where that got you. Alone in Springfield while we drink wine on the canals. Face it, Edward. You're needy. Always have been. Always will be. And we're. The word slammed into me again. The same word that had haunted me since the barbecue. Since the trip to Napa. Needy. As though all my sacrifices were nothing but chains I had wrapped around them. I whispered. I was never needy. I was your father. And we're. Anna didn't soften. She didn't apologize. Instead, she sighed. Her patience thin. Dad. This has to stop. When we get back, we'll talk about options. Patrick thinks it's time you moved into a facility. Somewhere safe. Somewhere you won't have to worry about bills or decisions. They were wanted from next. My heart stopped. A facility. It's for your own good. Patrick chimed in smoothly. You can't handle things anymore. You're careless with money. And frankly, you're an embarrassment. Selling your house would cover years of care. You don't need that space. Better for everyone. They were wanted from next. I couldn't speak. The betrayal was so absolute. So staggering. I felt as though the floor had dropped from under me. My daughter, the little girl I once carried on my shoulders through county fairs, who clung to me after nightmares, was plotting to strip me of my home, my dignity, my freedom, and she thought it was mercy. Finally, I forced words past the lump in my throat. If you send me away, if you take my home, you will lose me forever. Do you understand that, Anna? You will not have a father anymore. Actually, seer of. There was a pause. And for a fleeting moment I prayed she would hear me. That the daughter I once knew would come back. But then she said quietly, firmly, then maybe that's what has to happen. Actually, seer of. The line went dead. I sat there in my dark kitchen, the phone heavy in my hand, the silence pressing in on me. My reflection in the window looked like a stranger. For the first time, I truly believed I had lost her. Not to death, not to distance, but to choice. She had chosen a man who despised me. Chosen a life where I was nothing more than a burden to be discarded. I set the phone on the table, my hands steady in a way that surprised me. Steady because grief had hardened into something else, something sharper. Resolve. If they wanted war, they would have it. The night after that call, I don't remember sleeping. I wandered from room to room in my house like a man lost in his own skin. Every object I passed became a reminder of what I had given and what I had lost. The dining table where Anna once did her homework. The couch where she had curled up against me as a teenager. Tears streaming down her face after her first heartbreak. The photographs lining the hallway. Each one shouting back at me that I had been present for everything. And yet somehow I had ended up here discarded like an old coat no one needed anymore. By dawn, I found myself standing in the kitchen, staring at the empty chair across from mine. For years, I had kept that chair open, imagining someday Anna would bring her children here, and I would spoon out mashed potatoes onto little plates, tell bedtime stories, and watch a new generation carry our family name. But that dream was gone, ripped out of me by her voice on the phone. Maybe that's what has to happen. She had said it so easily, as if erasing me from her life was no different than crossing out a line on a shopping list. I poured coffee I couldn't drink. The bitter steam rose into my face, but the taste turned to ash the moment it touched my lips. My hands trembled, and I had to set the cup down before it slipped and shattered. In that moment, the weight of everything hit me all at once. The decades of sacrifice. The loneliness I had hidden behind work and chores. The hope I had carried like a fool that one day I would be rewarded with gratitude and love. Instead, I had been branded needy, a nuisance, a burden. My knees buckled, and I slid down to the floor, the cold tile pressing against me as sobs tore from my chest. I hadn't cried like that in years. Not since Margaret died. Back then, I had no choice but to swallow my grief because Anna needed me. But now there was no one to hold me together, no one to see me break. And so I broke completely, violently, my tears soaking the sleeves of my shirt as I whispered her name over and over like a prayer that would never be answered. At some point, exhaustion pulled me into a half-sleep on the floor. When I woke, sunlight was streaming through the curtains, dust motes swirling in the air. My body ached, my face stiff with dried tears. I dragged myself into the living room and sat heavily in my recliner, staring at nothing. Hours passed, but I barely noticed. My phone buzzed several times, probably bank alerts from Italy, but I ignored them. I couldn't bring myself to look at more proof of their betrayal. As night fell again, the loneliness wrapped itself tighter around me. Suffocating, I turned on the television just to drown out the silence. But the sound of strangers' laughter only made the emptiness more unbearable. I muted it and sat in the dim glow, my reflection staring back at me from the darkened screen. An old man, a fool, a man who had given everything and been told he was nothing. I thought about calling a friend, but realized I had none left. Over the years, I had let every friendship wither so I could be available for Anna. The fishing trips I skipped, the dinners I canceled, the invitations I declined. I had traded them all for her needs. And now, when I needed someone, I had no one. For a dangerous moment, I wondered what it would feel like to just stop, to lay down and never get up again, to let the silence swallow me whole. My chest tightened at the thought, tears returning. But then something else stirred beneath the despair, a flicker. Faint but insistent. It was anger, not the hot, explosive anger I had felt when Patrick mocked me, but a quieter, colder fire. Anger at myself for allowing this to happen. Anger at them for confusing my love with weakness. Anger at a world where a father could give everything and still be cast aside. That anger straightened my spine, dried my tears, and forced me to breathe again. I stood slowly, gripping the arms of the recliner, and walked back to my study. The papers were still scattered on the floor from the night before: receipts, bank statements, deeds, proof of every sacrifice I had made. I crouched down, gathered them into a neat stack, and placed them on the desk. This time, I didn't look at them with grief. I looked at them as evidence. Evidence of who I had been, and proof that I had the power to change what came next. As I turned off the light and left the study, I whispered into the dark, "You think I'm needy? You have no idea what I'm capable of." Fine, true. For the first time in weeks, I felt steady. The breaking point had come. But instead of leaving me in pieces, it had forged something harder inside me. Something ready to fight. The morning after I reached my breaking point, I woke with a strange clarity. My body still ached from the night before, but my mind was sharp in a way it hadn't been in years. The despair that had nearly drowned me had hardened into purpose. If they thought I was weak, if they thought I would simply fade away into some nursing home while they spent my money and stripped my house, they were wrong. I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table, spreading the bank statements across the wood surface like maps for a general preparing for war. Each receipt, each transaction told the story of my devotion, but it also told me where they had come to depend on me. That dependence was my leverage. I realized that my generosity had become their lifeline, and if I chose to cut it, they would drown in the life they had built on my back. The first step was financial. I logged into my accounts and reviewed every line. There it was. Anna listed as an authorized user. Her name tied to my credit as if it were her birthright. My finger hovered over the remove button again. But this time I didn't hesitate. I clicked. Confirmation flashed across the screen. Access revoked. It felt like severing a chain that had been around my neck for years. The second step was the house on Willow Creek Drive. They thought it was theirs, a symbol of their independence, their pride. But the deed still carried my name alone. I had bought it to give them stability, believing that someday they would transfer the paperwork. They never did. Maybe they thought I wouldn't notice. Maybe they thought I wouldn't care. But now, that oversight would be my weapon. I pulled out the manila folder from my desk, the one holding the title documents. My name glared back at me, bold and undeniable. I felt something close to satisfaction for the first time in weeks. This was not just paper, it was power. I knew then what I had to do. Sell the house, reclaim what was mine, and leave them with nothing but their arrogance. But plans needed execution. I dug out the worn business card of an old acquaintance, Thomas Briggs, a real estate agent who had once helped me refinance my own home. He was discreet, trustworthy, and above all, efficient. I called him that afternoon. "Edward," he said warmly when he recognized my voice. "Haven't heard from you in years. What can I do for you?" "I need to sell a property," I said firmly. "Quickly. No delays. The house on Willow Creek Drive. 9. There was a pause. Then his tone shifted, more professional. "That's your daughter's house, isn't it?" "It's mine," I replied flatly. "Confessions." He didn't question me further. By the end of the call, we had a plan for staging, photos, and pricing. He promised to move fast. The third step was logistics. If I sold the house, I needed to clear it before Anna and Patrick returned from their European vacation. That meant movers, storage, and careful timing. I called a local moving company, explained that the residents were out of town, and arranged for everything inside to be packed and placed in a storage unit under my name. The manager didn't bat an eye. Family disputes weren't rare, and he had likely seen worse. That night, as I sat at my desk reviewing the details, I felt both fear and exhilaration. Fear, Because I knew once I started, there was no going back. Exhilaration because, for the first time in years, I was acting for myself, not for them. I was reclaiming my life inch by inch, decision by decision. Still, doubt whispered in the dark corners of my mind. Was I being too harsh? Was this revenge instead of justice? I looked again at the credit card statements. The photos of their smiling faces in Venice. The cruel words replaying in my head. Needy. Embarrassment. Maybe that's what has to happen. Those words silenced my doubts. I began writing everything down. Dates. Contacts. Amounts, as if preparing a legal case. If they wanted to fight me, I would be ready. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a man who had been wronged, and I would not let them erase me without consequence. As I stacked the documents neatly, I realized something important. This plan wasn't only about punishing them, it was about saving myself. For too long, my identity had been tied to their approval, their needs, their lives. I had forgotten that I had a life of my own, one that still mattered, one worth defending. When I finally turned out the lights, a strange peace settled over me. For the first time in months, I slept soundly. Because tomorrow, the plan would begin in earnest. And when Anna and Patrick returned from sipping wine on my dime, they would find the life they had taken for granted gone packed into boxes. Sold off. Erased as easily as they had tried to erase me. The morning, the movers arrived. The air was crisp. The sky, a clear blue that seemed to mock the storm inside me. I had risen before dawn, dressed in my old work, jeans and boots, the same clothes I used to wear when building the life my daughter now dismissed. My hands trembled slightly as I laced them. But it wasn't weakness, it was anticipation. At 7:30, the truck rumbled down Willow Creek Drive. Stopping in front of the house Anna and Patrick believed was theirs. I stood on the sidewalk, keys heavy in my pocket. As three men climbed out of the cab, the foreman, a stocky man named Dave, shook my hand firmly. "Mr. Carter, right? Let's get started." There was the drive. I unlocked the front door. And for a moment I hesitated. This had once been my dream for Anna, a place where she would build her future, fill the rooms with laughter, and carry on the love her mother and I had poured into her life. But the laughter that had filled these walls had not been mine, it had been theirs, built on my sacrifices. With me locked outside, I pushed the door open and stepped aside. The movers entered with practiced efficiency. They began boxing up clothes, dishes, electronics. I walked through each room with them, pointing out what was theirs. The leather sofa I had bought for their anniversary. The dining set I had paid for when Patrick lost his job. The gleaming appliances in the kitchen, chosen with my credit card. Each item carried a story of my giving, and now, of my reclaiming. In the bedroom, I paused when I saw the photo albums stacked on a shelf. I picked one up and flipped through it. Their wedding day, Patrick's parents smiling wide in nearly every picture, while I appeared at the edges, cut off, blurred, an afterthought in the story of my own daughter's life. I closed the album and handed it to one of the movers. "Box it." My voice was steady, though my chest ached. By mid-morning, the house echoed with emptiness. The movers carried out the last pieces of furniture, their boots thudding on the wooden floors. I walked behind them, carrying smaller boxes myself, ignoring Dave's half-hearted protests. "I'm not that old," I told him, forcing a smile. It felt good to lift, to sweat, to use my body with purpose again. At the storage facility, we loaded everything into Unit 42B. The roll-up door clanged shut, sealing their lives into a metal box. I paid Dave in cash and gave each man a generous tip. "Thank you," I said. Dave looked at me, his eyes kind. "Family business." "Huh?" he asked softly. I nodded. "Something like that." He didn't press further. That afternoon, I met with Thomas Briggs, the realtor. The house was staged, photos taken, and within days offers began to arrive. The market was hot, just as Thomas had promised. When the final papers were signed and the sale closed, I felt the weight of a lifetime shift off my shoulders. Money transferred into my account, clean and indisputable. For the first time, I had taken something back. Yet the victory was not without sorrow. That evening, I returned to my own home, sat at the kitchen table, and stared at the stack of documents, proof of the sale. My hands shook as I held the deed, now stamped with new names, strangers who would live in the house I had once believed was Anna's future. I whispered into the quiet. "I gave you everything, and you threw me away." "They're right." But along with the grief came a strange lightness. I had acted. I had not let them dictate the end of my story. I had taken control in a way they never expected. And as the days passed, the fear that had once paralyzed me gave way to something stronger. Resolve. When the phone rang that weekend, an international number flashing across the screen, I didn't rush to answer. I let it ring, savoring the knowledge that while they sipped wine in Florence, their world back home was collapsing. When I finally picked up, Anna's voice was frantic. "Dad." The card declined at dinner. "What happened?" I sipped my coffee before replying. "I removed you. Your access is gone. And it is readily." Her gasp was sharp, followed by Patrick's furious voice in the background. "You'll regret this, old man." I smiled faintly, though my heart ached. "No. For the first time in years, I don't regret anything." And I hung up. That night, I sat on my porch beneath the stars, listening to the crickets. For the first time in decades, I felt something close to peace. I had executed the plan. Their hold on me was broken. Yet deep down, I knew the storm was only beginning. The day Anna and Patrick returned from Europe was colder than usual for late spring. The clouds hung low, heavy with rain, as if the sky itself anticipated the storm about to erupt. I knew they were coming. Anna had texted once from the airport, not to apologize, not to ask how I was, but to demand an explanation. I didn't reply. Some things were better said face to face. I parked across from the house on Willow Creek Drive, the house that was no longer theirs. A sold sign staked into the front lawn swayed in the breeze. Through the window, I could see boxes piled neatly in the foyer. Not Anna's or Patrick's, but those of the new owners. A young couple had bought it, eager to begin their lives. I waited in my truck, engine off, watching as the taxi pulled up to the curb. Anna stepped out first, her hair pulled back, sunglasses hiding her eyes. Patrick followed with their luggage, his expression smug and impatient. They looked tired from the flight. But when their eyes landed on the sign in the yard, confusion spread across their faces. "What the hell?" Patrick muttered, his voice rising as he turned toward Anna. "Why is there a sold sign here?" Anna's eyes scanned the front porch. Then she froze when she saw me climb out of my truck. Her mouth opened, then closed again, fury replacing confusion. "Dad, what did you do?" I walked slowly across the street, envelope in hand. My boots crunched against the gravel, each step measured. "I did what any property owner has the right to do," I said evenly. "I sold it." "And Dill," Patrick laughed. A sharp, humorless bark. "You're bluffing. This is our home. You can't just, it was never your home. I cut in. Check the deed. The name on it was mine. Always mine. And Dell. Anna's face flushed, tears springing to her eyes. How could you, all our things? They're safe. I interrupted. Handing Patrick the envelope, he snatched it, tearing it open with shaking hands. His eyes scanned the paper. Storage Unit 42B. Paid for 1 month in advance. You put our lives in storage? The sound somewhere between rage and despair. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. I preserved everything you owned with more care than you showed me. Every box labeled, every item protected. You can retrieve them when you're ready. But this house is no longer yours. And get a gun. Patrick stepped closer, trying to intimidate, his jaw clenched, his fists tight. This is theft. We'll fight you in court. And get a gun. I shook my head. It's not theft when the law is on my side. The sale is final. The money is mine. Go ahead and try. But you'll lose. Aided hast to a mutton. Anna's voice rose to a shriek. How could you do this to your own daughter? I looked at her for a long moment, my throat tightening. But my voice stayed calm. How could you do what you did to your own father? The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the wind rattling the sign in the yard. The new owners pulled up then, a young couple with a baby in the back seat. They stepped out, surprised by the scene unfolding on their new front lawn. Is everything all right here? The husband asked cautiously. I turned to them and nodded. Everything's fine. Congratulations on your new home. For yesterday. Patrick's face twisted with fury. This isn't over. He spat, his voice low and venomous. Yes, it is, I replied, stepping back toward my truck, because I said it is. And attend she, Anna called after me, her voice breaking. Dad, please, where are we supposed to go? I paused at the door of my truck, looking back one last time. Her eyes were wide, filled with a desperation that might have softened me once. But not now. Not after everything. That's not my problem anymore. I said quietly. You made your choice when you pushed me away. He whined. I climbed into the cab, started the engine, and pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, I saw them standing there with their luggage, looking like strangers who had stumbled into the wrong life. For once, I didn't feel guilty. For once, I felt free. It didn't take long for the legal papers to arrive. 3 weeks after the showdown on Willow Creek Drive, I heard the knock at my door. A man in a crisp suit handed me an envelope and said, "You've been served." I signed without hesitation, already knowing what it contained. Anna and Patrick were suing me, claiming I had stolen their home, that I had acted out of malice and fraud. I sat at the kitchen table, opened the packet, and read every page. Their words dripped with entitlement, painting themselves as victims, claiming I had betrayed them, twisting every sacrifice I had made into some selfish attempt at control. My hands trembled as I turned the pages, but not with fear, with anger, with disbelief at how far they would go to protect their pride. My lawyer, an old friend named Robert Hale, reviewed the documents that afternoon. He was calm, efficient, his glasses sliding down his nose as he read. When he looked up, his expression was firm. Edward, they don't have a case. The deed was in your name. You had every right to sell. This is noise, an attempt to scare you. Was the doy. Still, I couldn't help but feel the weight of it. A courtroom meant more than laws. It meant eyes. Neighbors would talk. Colleagues from the past would whisper. Strangers would take sides. But I had nothing left to lose. The trial date came faster than I expected. The courthouse in downtown Springfield was gray and imposing, its marble steps cold beneath my shoes as I climbed them. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old wood and dust. Anna and Patrick were already seated with their lawyer, dressed sharply, their expressions carefully arranged into masks of righteous indignation. Anna wouldn't meet my eyes. When the judge entered, everyone stood. The proceedings began, voices echoing in the high, ceilinged room. Their lawyer painted a picture of cruelty. A father who had heartlessly sold his daughter's home while she was overseas. A man who had acted out of spite rather than necessity. Each sentence felt like a knife, but I kept my gaze steady, my jaw tight. Then it was Robert's turn. He laid out the facts with precision, the mortgage papers, the bank transfers, evidence stacked like bricks in a wall I could stand behind. My client gave generously for years, Robert said firmly. But generosity does not erase ownership. The law is clear. He acted within his rights. For see, when it was my chance to speak, I stood, my palms damp, my knees trembling slightly. But once I began, the words poured out. I gave my daughter everything I had. I told the judge, her education, her home, her security all came from me. I never asked for repayment. I never asked for thanks. But when she decided I no longer counted as family, when she used my money behind my back while excluding me from her life, I realized I had to act. I did not steal from her. I reclaimed what was already mine. For read it. The courtroom was silent except for the scratching of pens. Anna shifted in her seat, her face pale, her hands twisting in her lap. Patrick stared at the table, jaw tight. The judge reviewed the evidence, his face unreadable. Finally, he spoke. This court finds that the defendant acted within his legal rights. The property in question was solely in his name. The sale is valid. The plaintiff's claims are dismissed. Furthermore, the plaintiffs are responsible for their own legal fees. I was along it and the gavel struck. Sharp and final. Relief washed over me. Though it was not sweet, it was heavy. Bittersweet. I had won. But the victory felt like ashes in my mouth. Anna sat frozen, her eyes brimming with tears. For a fleeting second, I thought she might look at me the way she once did. As her father, her protector. But she didn't. She turned to Patrick instead, her face crumpling. And I knew I had lost her long before this judgment. Word of the trial spread quickly. Springfield was not a large city, and gossip traveled faster than truth. At the coffee shop, I overheard whispers. Some people praised me. He worked his whole life. He deserved better. Others condemned me. Family should stick together, no matter what. I learned to let the voices pass by, neither defending myself nor seeking approval. Robert called me the next day. Clean victory. Edward, he said. They have no grounds for appeal. I thanked him. Though my voice was heavy, winning in court had not healed the wound. It had only proven what I already knew. Love and law are not the same. That evening, I sat in my living room, the judgment papers on the table before me. I traced my finger over the stamped seal, feeling both vindicated and hollow. I had defended myself, taken back what was mine, and yet the emptiness in my chest remained. My daughter was gone not by death, not by distance, but by choice. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, and whispered into the quiet. So this is justice. And still, I have nothing. There is no stir. After the judgment, the house felt quieter than ever. The legal papers lay neatly filed away. The victory certain. Yet my heart remained unsettled. I had defended myself. Yes. I had proved I was more than a wallet to be emptied. more than an old man to be discarded. But the silence in my home still echoed louder than any gavel. One Saturday, while running errands, I wandered into the local animal shelter. I told myself I was only curious, but deep down I knew why I was there. The loneliness had grown too heavy. The rooms too empty. A volunteer led me down a row of kennels, barking and whining filling the air, until we stopped at one. A golden retriever, 3 years old, tail thumping against the floor as soon as our eyes met. His name was Bailey. I knelt, and he pressed his head against the bars. Warm and steady. Something inside me cracked, not in pain this time, but in release. I signed the adoption papers that afternoon. By evening, Bailey rode in the passenger seat of my truck, his head out the window, ears flapping in the breeze. For the first time in months, I smiled without forcing it. Life began to change in small ways. Morning walks with Bailey replaced the lonely silence of breakfast. His steady presence beside my recliner filled the void where despair once sat. I found myself breathing easier, laughing softly when he pawed at my hand, demanding attention. He didn't care about money, about deeds or bank accounts. All he wanted was my presence, my companionship. Weeks later, I traded in my second car and used my savings to buy a modest travel trailer. I had always dreamed of seeing the places I'd postponed for Anna's sake: the Rockies, the Grand Canyon, the quiet towns scattered across the Midwest. Now, with Bailey at my side, I finally could. The morning we left Springfield, I packed light, clothes, a few books, Bailey's supplies, and one photo album. Inside were pictures of Anna as a child, the little girl who once clung to my hand. Before time and choices had changed her, I couldn't bring myself to throw them away. She was still my daughter, even if she no longer wanted to be. As I drove west, the highway opening before me, Bailey rested his head on my arm. Content. The horizon stretched wide, painted in gold by the rising sun. I realized then that freedom didn't come from erasing the past. It came from refusing to let it define my future. I whispered to myself, voice steady, "This is where I belong. Not in their shadow, not in their judgment, but here, on my own path, with loyalty beside me." They is headed already. Bailey wagged his tail, and I kept driving. The road carrying us toward something new. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't running from pain, I was moving toward peace.